What if I told you some coastal cities might disappear? Rising seas, stronger storms, and flooding are no longer future threats. They are happening now. The IPCC reports that sea levels are rising twice as fast as they did in the 20th century. With more people and infrastructure along coastlines, the risks are growing. The question is, how do we make the right decision before it's too late? In this episode, we explore real-world projects that show how geospatial data help cities, businesses, and governments anticipate risks and plan for the future. Because before we act, we need to understand what the risks are, what's at stake, and how to adapt. The challenge isn't just collecting data, it's knowing how to use it to drive action. The future of our coastline is being decided right now. Are we making the good choices?
BlueTech Around the World, the reference podcast for blue technologies and ocean innovation. Hello everyone! Welcome to BlueTech Around the World podcast. Have you ever wondered what happens when the sea levels start to rise? For some coastal community, it's not just a challenge for the future. It's something they are already dealing with today. During the Ocean Leaders program organized by the Peace Boat and the Ocean Policy Research Institute, I met Krish, the acting principal environmental officer at Fiji's Ministry of Environmental and Climate Change. He told me about some of the work they are doing in Fiji, like relocating villages affected by rising sea levels and building seawalls to protect communities. They are also raising infrastructure and putting coastal management practices in place to reduce erosion and flooding. But this isn't just a Fiji issue. It's something many coastal regions around the world are facing. According to multiple reports from NASA and the US Geological Survey, almost 80% of the Maldives could become uninhabitable by 2050. And the IPCC indicates that by 75 years, without a drastic reduction of our greenhouse gases emissions, sea level could rise by more than 1 meter, while associated extreme climate events are expected to become more frequent and intense. And these phenomena will reshape all coastlines where the population is most dense and continues to grow. But here is the good news. There are innovative solutions that can help us manage this change and make our coastlines more resilient. Today we are talking about coastal resilience. What is it? Why it matters? And how we can prepare for the future. For this episode, I'm excited to be joined by Greg Murphy, a former colleague from my time at the Maritime Alliance in San Diego. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Mary Lou. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Excited to reconnect with you.
Thanks, Greg. Greg Murphy is the Coastal Resilience Lead for Fugro, focused on the Americas region, where he helps clients prepare for climate adaptation and preserve their natural ecosystem. Fugro is a global leader in geodata insights, specializes in mapping, modeling, and monitoring vital information about our planet and its built environments. With a career spanning policy, industry, and market development in the sustainable blue economy, Greg focused on creating long-term partnerships that build coastal resilience, enhance oceans' health, and drive mutual beneficial value. So thank you very much, Greg, for being with us today on the podcast. So Greg, can you start by telling us a bit about your journey to becoming the Coastal Resilience Lead at Fugro and what drew you to this specific area?
Yeah, thanks, Mary Lou. Always happy to share my passion with the ocean, with your audience. So I've always been driven by and drawn by the ocean. The ocean sustainability has always been my North Star, all the way back from growing up as a kid, families visiting the beach and the ocean and really enjoying that. So I've always made it a point in my career to be able to do something with regards to the ocean. Started out in ocean policy. I worked for an elected official here in Southern California and really helped him become a champion of the blue economy, of the sustainable blue economy. He ended up getting appointed to the California Coastal Commission. The White House several years ago appointed him to the National Ocean Council. So I got to do ocean policy at the local, state, and the national level. And that was a really wonderful sandbox to play in. Met a lot of great people along the way. Learned a lot of things as well. Ultimately, though, got recruited into the industry side of ocean technology and sustainability, where I met you actually at the Maritime Alliance. We were very proactive in organizing the BlueTech cluster here in San Diego. So combining ocean and water technology, connecting entrepreneurs and investors, promoting innovation through collaboration, and really highlighting the economic value of this blue economy, which is so important for all of us. And so that was really fun and interesting. Got also drawn into the innovation side. So worked at a very exciting startup also here in San Diego for several years until more recently joining Fugro less than a year ago, actually. I'm happy to go into more detail about what Fugro does and what we're doing. But through that experience, I've really gotten to know Fugro. I've known a lot of the team at Fugro for a number of years. And I knew the capability that Fugro has to be applied into this climate and nature space, which includes coastal resilience and ocean health. So yeah, it really feels like a startup inside of this multinational Dutch company. Excited to apply the capabilities that Fugro has over the last 60 years and apply that to the climate and nature category.
Thank you, Greg. A really inspiring career. It's really great to see all the beautiful and impactful things that you are doing for the blue economy. And I'm really happy to have been part of your professional journey when I was in San Diego. Okay, let's jump into the subject. So first for our listener, in your words, what does coastal resilience mean? And why is it becoming increasingly important for coastal community? Just to have a short definition first.
Yeah, it's a great question. In my mind, coastal resilience is really our first line of defense. And that could take many forms. It could take the form of green infrastructure. It could take the form of gray infrastructure. But it's really about understanding the climate risk and vulnerability with regards to sea level rise and with regards to increasing activities of major storms, also coastal erosion, inland flooding, heavy rainfalls. We're in an era where our Earth systems are quickly getting outside of the framework that humans have been used to over the last hundreds of thousands of years. And as we enter this uncharted territory of increasing carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions, increasing atmospheric temperatures, increasing ocean temperatures, the modeling suggests there's going to be significant impacts, right? And those impacts are going to be initially seen through our coastal environments, our coastal ecosystems, our coastal economies, and also inland water systems as well. So coastal erosion is a massive problem. So coastal resilience is the ability for communities to prevent disaster, to respond and to mitigate potential risk, and ultimately to rebound after a major storm. And so we need to build coastal resilience. We can do that with nature. That would be the green infrastructure side that we could talk about. But it's about, helping communities to prepare for climate adaptation moving forward. And then ultimately to model that. And then, as solutions are implemented, also to monitor those solutions over time to make sure that they're performing according to plan.
Thank you, Greg. Before jumping on the modeling side, I just want to say that you were talking about community, and actually, coastal resilience isn't just about protecting land. It's about safeguarding the livelihoods, the cultures, and ecosystem tied to this area. So it's about thinking long term. And just a few words, because you were talking about the green aspect. So I'm thinking it's about nature-based solution and how they are contributing to more resilient coastal ecosystems. Can you just say a little word about that before jumping to the modeling aspect of coastal resilience and mapping?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we, as humanity, we have to rely on nature. Nature has spent hundreds of thousands of years figuring things out. So we have a lot to learn from nature, including how nature can protect coastlines. And so more recently, scientists have done a really good job of understanding, how do mangrove forests, how do seagrass meadows, how do large kelp farms really soften the blow. So when there is a large storm with high wave activity, high wave inundation, how do those natural ecosystems serve not only to protect our coastline, but to soften the impact when those big storms do happen? And so nature does a great job of mitigating from coastal erosion, of softening the impact from storms, of course, of providing beautiful habitat that humans like to look at. But they provide additional ecosystem-based services as well for in terms of natural habitat, in terms of benthic communities that support ocean health, so on and so forth. So to the extent that we can, it's really important to prioritize nature-based solutions, to preserve and protect those nature-based solutions where they already exist, and to figure out where we can enhance and potentially grow natural ecosystems for the benefit of the ocean and for ourselves. And so what this does, of course, it contributes to ocean health, as I mentioned. It increases the livelihood of organisms in the ocean, which also supports fisheries and supports fisher people. It contributes to the carbon sequestration of pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere through photosynthesis, and then stores that carbon in the plant material that gets decomposed and deposited into these coastal ecosystems underground. And contributes to our coastal economies. So, yeah, 40% of humans globally live near the coast, and so we need to protect that at all costs. And nature-based solutions do a really good job.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. And actually, I've been one of the luckiest person because I had the opportunities to see that firsthand in Miami. And also in Guatemala, I've been doing kayaking in the mangrove forest in Miami, and that was really for coastal protection. And in Guatemala, it was more as a protected areas for the fishermen also, because the mangroves protect and it acts as a nursery for the fish. So yeah, so I've been one of the lucky ones to see that firsthand. Okay, so now that we understand what coastal resilience means, let's dive deeper into the tools that make it possible, starting with the power of geodata. So, how does Fugro collect and utilize geodata to create actionable insight for coastal resilience?
Yeah, that's the real reason why I'm so excited to be at Fugro, because I've known the capabilities of Fugro for quite a few years, and the ability to apply those capabilities. So maybe it might be worthwhile to kind of describe what are the expertise and capabilities of Fugro for your audience who may not already be familiar with Fugro. Yeah, so it's about 60 years old, originally from coming out of the Netherlands. We employ about 12,000 employees across more than 50 countries around the world. And we operate on both the marine and the land side. And so we have historically served offshore industries in terms of positioning, in terms of environmental monitoring, site characterization, inspecting the assets that are offshore. And through those 60 years of experience, we've developed a tremendous capability and expertise in collecting the data that is important for decision making and informing our clients about how to reduce the risk, how to develop infrastructure, how to develop projects. And again, that's offshore and on land. And so we are the world's leading geodata specialist. So what is geodata? Geodata, I break it down into two different terms: geology or geography, if you prefer, the planet. So what is the data to understand the planet and the structures that are built upon it that support our clients in their decision-making process? Historically, that's been done in the oil and gas industry. But starting about a decade ago, Fugro really understood that we need to be doing more in the climate and nature space. And so over the subsequent years, the team developed a climate and nature strategy. How do we transition? How do we use the capabilities to support not only offshore wind energy, which has really come on in a big way internationally, but also how do we support climate adaptation and nature preservation using this body of expertise? And so about this time last year in 2023, Fugro announced to the public markets their climate and nature strategy. And so now we have a wave of new team members that are implementing that strategy across the regions. I'm focused on the Americas region. I've got 3 colleagues that are in other regions, including EU and Africa, Middle East and India, and the APAC region. And what we do is we advise our clients about using geodata to support their decision-making process. Again, it's about understanding the climate risk, developing adaptation pathways, developing pathways to preserve nature, like we talked about with coastal resilient and nature-based solutions. It's about modeling the future based on various environmental criteria. And then it's about implementing solutions and monitoring those solutions over time. So we talk about the use of geodata as a foundational tool to support decision-making in terms of mapping, modeling, and monitoring. Without the geodata, it's really difficult. You and your viewers might understand. If you don't have the information, it's really difficult to make decisions. And in many cases, those decisions are or can be very costly. So you could talk about, restoring a mangrove, or you can talk about building gray infrastructure that in some cases are worth billions of dollars. And so our clients really rely on the high resolution, very accurate geodata that Fugro provides to support their decisions.
Okay, so if I understand well, geodata is like the foundation of a house. Without it, you can't build any stable house. It's what helps you understand vulnerabilities and make smart decisions about what's going after. BlueTech Around the World. Okay, so can you share some example on how geodata has been used in real-world scenarios to enhance coastal resilience? Do you have some projects that you can share with us to see the real impact?
Yep, of course. So for example, when we talk about geodata, there are many different forms of geodata. There is the geophysical, so think hydrography, think mapping, ocean mapping. So really just understanding what the water column and specifically what does the seabed, the seafloor look like. So that kind of map of the seafloor is really important for understanding coastal dynamics, for understanding change over time, and understanding how increasing climate risk will impact the coastline. So you can imagine ports and cities along the coast are really interested in understanding how to move forward. So we've been helping the Port of San Francisco develop their coastal resilience plan, again, using our geophysical data, but also our geotechnical expertise. So geotechnical would be the characterization of the soil or characterization of the underground environment, to understand seismic risk, to understand how does water percolate through the soil, what type of soil, what kind of structure can you build on the soil safely to achieve a certain outcome that the port might have. And so that's one example where it's been a multi-year program and leading towards a very robust program in the future. You can look at, we did a demonstration study over the last year in Southwest Texas, actually. So South Padre Island in Port Isabel, there's a region of the Southwest Texas which has a lot of vulnerability to sea level rise and to storms. So if you imagine, it's actually an isthmus or a peninsula, you might say. It's surrounded by water on 2 sides. On the one side, you've got the Gulf of Mexico. On the inside, you've got the bay. And so what we did was we said, let's do 2 different studies combined into one. Let's look at the publicly available data, publicly available geodata that's been collected by various federal government agencies over the last several years, which is typically of good resolution, but relatively low resolution compared to what you could have. So we did a model of the future sea level rise scenarios through 2040, through 2060, through 2080, with certain types of storms, and with varying degrees of sea level rise. And so we said, okay, that's one study. Now let's actually go out and collect some high resolution data using our aerial mapping system, our aerial LiDAR system, which we collected that data on behalf of NOAA. And then we did a comparative analysis, and what we found was actually that the number of buildings that are impacted by sea level rise over the various time horizons was off by 64% when you compare the two. And so what that does is impacts planning efforts. Typically cities, state governments, they engage in planning studies for a 30, 40, 50-year time horizon. And so you want to have as high resolution data as possible, because otherwise you risk having outcomes that are quite different than what actually happens. And so that's one example of another project that we've actually informed the local municipality about the risk and vulnerability. And then what you do, if you have that high resolution data, you've got the ability to create adaptation pathways. And so once you understand the risk, then you can make decisions to mitigate that risk. And so through adaptation pathways, it could be a specific type of intervention using a nature-based solution. It could include adaptation plus retreat. It could include, elevating structures to be outside of the flood zone. There's a lot of different tools in our tool belt that we can use. And by the way, Fugro doesn't implement the projects in terms of raising building profiles. What we do is we advise our clients through the consultative approach on the best pathway forward using sound science. Ultimately, it's the client. In this case, it would be the city of South Padre Island that would have to make those really difficult and challenging decisions. But we try to provide the best available science for them to do that.
Okay, thank you, Greg. It was a real great example. It helped us really understand how you position yourself. But actually, how does Fugro position in the value chain for ocean data and geodata? Are you more specialized in the data acquisition or on the data analysis? I understand that after you are doing like all the insight as a support decision tool for the new clients to make the decision. But regarding this value chain, how do you position yourself?
Exactly. The geodata is only useful as data. Ultimately, it's about the insights and the modeling and the monitoring. I'll give you another example. In Europe, actually, in the last year, Fugro was selected by the country of Italy through ISPRA to do a mapping project for the entire coastline of Italy to map all of the seagrass off the coast of Italy. So this is a wonderful example of our ability to integrate various technologies for the mapping and characterization of the seagrass off the coast of Italy. What we're able to do is we're able to integrate satellite Earth observation data with surface vessel hydrography data, with under the water AUV and ROV data to understand, okay, where is the seagrass? How much seagrass? And what is the health of that seagrass? So the location, the abundance, and the health of seagrass is critically important for the environmental and biodiversity monitoring that Italy wants to do. And what this could do is could support a blue carbon stock assessment. So then the country of Italy could go to various other partners and agencies and say, hey, this is the natural blue carbon assets that we have off of our coast. We've got the baseline data to understand what we have. Now we can start to see, where is the health of the seagrass thriving, or where is the health of the seagrass perhaps compromised or diminishing. And so then the country and the various government agencies can say, okay, well, we see that the health of the seagrass over here is not that great. Well, why is that? Perhaps there's a stormwater plume that impacts the ability for seagrass to gain sunlight and to conduct photosynthesis. And so you're able to find those hotspots where, okay, maybe some interventions could happen to improve the health of the seagrass. But where I see that going actually is making those on the ground decisions, but also on the ocean health side is actually increasing the impact that seagrass has. So increasing its ability to store blue carbon. And as the international agencies and the European agencies align on a blue carbon credit market scheme, then the country of Italy is going to be very well positioned because they have the baseline data and they're able to make decisions to improve the health of their seagrass, just as one example. Similarly, there's a very exciting project in the Caribbean with the Bahamas. Bahamas is known to have a lot of seagrass. And so they're looking at how do you actually attract finance from international finance institutions to reduce their national debt. And so it was just recently announced, in fact, there's a consortium of financial institutions that are essentially allowing for the government of the Bahamas to reduce the percentage interest rate that they pay on their national debt, and the margin that they save on their interest rate for that national debt, they commit to preserving marine conservation areas. In their case as well, it's also seagrass, because of the environmental benefits that provides. And so you're talking about really significant dollars. You're talking about major financial investment, and you're talking about the ability to preserve ecosystems that protect the coastline of the Bahamas, but also store carbon. And that's a really interesting example of how I see the future of ocean mapping. And back to your question, how geodata supports the decision-making process. So in that case, the decision-making process is for the country of Italy or for the country of Bahamas, but also for the financial institutions to understand, where do we invest our money? We've got a number of kind of funding schemes for ocean and climate and nature-based solutions. Well, where do you make those investments? You want to make sure you're having the biggest impact because there are limited dollars. So the financial institutions, the insurance companies really care about making smart decisions. And that's where geodata comes in.
Wow, that's amazing, Greg. Thank you very much. The first thing that comes in mind is about coastal resilience, but it shows that blue carbon is a hot topic, and how this marine ecosystem can help store the carbon and help us tackle climate change. BlueTech Around the World. I'm just curious, with your experience at Fugro, what's the balance between your work for coastal preservation and your work for a new topic, for example, for carbon sequestration? How did you see the shift? Is it a market that is growing right now about a blue carbon credit? How do you see it right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we see kind of the maturity of the blue carbon market and really the climate and nature market more generally as being where offshore wind was 10 years ago. It's still at the very early stage. It's very exciting. There are a number of flagship projects that have been announced. There's progress being made. You have now the support, as I mentioned earlier, of financial institutions, insurance companies. You also have private sector companies like Fugro and others that are providing the enabling technologies, the enabling services to support the growth of this industry. Again, just like offshore wind. And so there was a market signal about a decade ago to say, hey, we've got to diversify our energy resources. We've got to invest more into renewable energy. How do we do that? Well, you got to have data. You got to have insights. You got to have modeling. And that was really now blossomed into a very significant industry globally for offshore wind. Climate and nature, blue carbon are at a similar stage now, where I would expect over the next 10 years, this to be a really high growth area for a number of private sector players, a number of national governments and financial institutions. Blue carbon is very exciting. There's a lot of lessons that folks who are promoting blue carbon can learn from previous lessons of the green carbon or green carbon credit market. And hopefully those lessons can be applied to the blue carbon to make it more impactful. There's other areas too. So, we talked about the nature-based, the seagrasses, the mangroves, and their contributions to carbon and to nature-based ecosystem services. There's also more proactive efforts, right? And so we're following very closely this topic of marine carbon dioxide removal. So this is a human intervention to support the ocean's ability to sequester carbon. So marine carbon dioxide removal is in its absolute infancy. There are a number of projects that are being in the pilot scale phase currently, and yet there still is no real internationally agreed environmental impact assessment framework. And so where Fugro comes in is we can help inform, based on best available science, that framework for environmental impact. You really have to have that before some of these significant projects are underway. Because the worst thing that can happen is for ecosystems to be disrupted in the ocean. Listen, we all know how important the ocean is, but I think it's always worth repeating. 71% of the surface of our planet is ocean. Half of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean. The ocean absorbs 50% of the excess heat from the increase in greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere, and 99% of all habitat on planet Earth is actually under the ocean. And so the ocean is absolutely critical. We have to maintain its health. We have to improve its health, not just for it, but also for ourselves, for our own livelihoods. And so we're taking a very proactive and science-based approach to helping some of these industries move forward to make sure that we're doing it responsibly and creating a safe and livable world.
Thank you for this recap. Actually, it's really important to understand the link between ocean and climate change, how the one affect the other, and how the climate change have effect on the rise of the temperature, the sea level rise, but also how the ocean could be part of the solution to tackle some of the climate change issues. And also something really interesting that you say, that we should learn from the past. You are talking about the green carbon. And now I think it's really important that we need science, we need data to make decisions. And the data that you collected should be at the basis of any framework, any decision, any structural path that we're going to make regarding blue carbon. And one of the topics that I like a lot that you were mentioning regarding Fugro's activities was about the way that you combine different kind of data. You were talking about underwater robots, surface vehicles, but also satellite data. And thanks to that, you have different parameters, different kind of data, and combining all of them will give you more insights. How do you manage all this data? Do you do it all internally, or do you have partners to combine all of this?
Fugro definitely works with a number of partners to achieve whatever the client needs. So it's ultimately, what does the client need? What is the minimal investment that's required to achieve the client's objectives? So you start with the satellite Earth observation data. You develop an understanding based on that satellite data, which is relatively inexpensive, and then you can kind of downscale it more closer to the ground from there with higher resolution data. We have a wide fleet of aerial lidar assets. We have uncrewed aerial systems, so the RAMS, which is an aerial multi-beam mapping system that is uncrewed, so it reduces some of the challenges with regards to the cost, also to environmental emissions, and we're able to collect high-resolution data that way. We also have a fleet of ocean-going vessels that are ranging different sizes from deep water, open ocean, almost research vessels to, the near-shore smaller vessels as well. And then from there, you've got the ability to integrate underwater vehicles through the AUVs, the ROVs, and other technologies too. And then buoys, right? So we've got an array of mid-ocean buoys that collects a number of different data parameters on ocean current and temperature and wave heights and atmospheric temperature and kind of the monitoring stations of the ocean. And so all that data is derived either through ourselves or through partners that we work with to deliver a set of actionable insights to the customer. And we do that through an online portal that we've developed called VerGeo. So VerGeo is wholly owned by Fugro. It's our solution for visualizing these multiple sources of data. And it gives a client the ability to track what is the data that has been collected. Give me the metadata, the files that have the data, and so that I can have that immediately or in near real time. And then also give me, through that online platform of VerGeo, the ability to have the insights to make decisions. And so that's a system that we've deployed, and it's worked really well initially for our offshore wind clients. And we're increasingly doing that as well for our coastal resilience, our climate and nature clients as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. Now a business question. I'm just curious regarding your different customers. Is it more like B2B, like for example, your customers that want to build an offshore wind farm and need some geo survey data information before doing their project? Or is it more business to government with the examples that you give us with Italy or other government or institution, more like on the survey and diagnostic of their marine assets or ecosystem? So with your opinion right now, what's your persona
Yeah, you can imagine that Fugro being a large company working in multiple different markets with many countries around the world. That there's a large range of the type of personas that we work with. So I appreciate the question. Yeah, we work with the private sector. We work with project developers. So, for example, in the case of offshore wind, we work directly with the project developer for offshore wind, which supports their developments timeline. It supports their operations, and then ultimately supports their decommissioning as well. Several decades into the future. I mentioned the Italy case. That is a contract with the government of Italy, with their research organization, ISPRA. We've partnered with NGOs. We respond either in partnership or directly to research organizations to provide geodata services and analysis and geo consulting and other. So it's a wide range. So public sector, private sector, national governments, federal agencies, state governments, city governments. We have the flexibility and the expertise to apply our services to really the whole spectrum.
So it's great to see that everyone is on board for this specific question.
I think it's important for us to also just highlight that, part of the reason why I'm so excited to be at Fugro and to do this work is because of the scalability and to do things efficiently with limited resources and to do things quickly. So we always want to maintain an ethos of safety and responsibility. But sometimes you have to have the scale that a large private company has in order to bring all of the right resources and solutions together. And it's not always going to be the same. Sometimes there's one-off projects that are a little bit different. But for the most part, we can do things at such a scale that really benefits the clients and reduces their time for development, reduces their risk over time, preserves their very limited resources. And that's a message that, we've been spending a lot of time, for example, in the Caribbean, again, through our partners and through various events organized by the United Nations, for example. We're getting a lot of market pull for individual projects in portions of individual nations of the Caribbean. And so small island developing states are a key priority for Fugro because we understand the need. But the challenge is because our data is so expensive sometimes and so difficult to collect and difficult to process, sometimes you'll find yourself in a situation where the project just doesn't happen. So our message is, again, as a large private sector company, we can do things at scale. Let's do them at scale. Let's do a large comprehensive mapping program for the entire Caribbean. And then we can downscale the data from there to support decision makings in individual nations, individual islands. I see that as a key driver moving forward because without that, I think it's going to be very difficult to make the best decisions on available science. And that's a key point I want to get across.
No, that's great, actually, that the scalability and the size and competencies and historic of Fugro allow you to have this power of action and have this huge amount of data. And like that, you can help for the democratization of access to this kind of data and science to make insightful decisions for the countries or actors that couldn't have access to this kind of data otherwise. So yeah, that's a real important point. One last question, because I saw that we arrive almost at the end of our episode. I was just wondering, according to you, what's going to be the next new tech or ocean disruptions that's going to have an impact on coastal resilience? It could be on the data acquisition, it could be on the mitigation system. What's the most promising innovation that could help on these specific topics, according to you?
Ooh, that's a big question. I'm seeing a lot more attention, as we talked about before, on the seagrass, the ability for the blue carbon markets to succeed. The introduction of blue finance, I think, is really interesting. You're seeing technologies also being developed in the marine carbon dioxide removal space. There are a number of technologies that are still early stage that could be interesting. Again, I think you have to have the environmental impact assessment framework. The ability to assess that environmental impact is going to be really important. You're seeing the use of AI, machine learning, deep learning. Of course, that's a buzzword that a lot of people like to talk about. But we also recognize, for any large language model, the model is only as good as the data. So you want to have high quality data. You need to have a lot of the data to inform the model. And so the ability to, for example, do benthic seafloor classification and to identify certain species using AI, it's about having the data that you have, using the data that you have and doing things a little bit better, faster, cheaper. So I do see a step up in the ability to support climate and nature, climate adaptation, nature preservation, using the AI models that Fugro is developing, that other organizations are developing as well. I do see that as a significant driver for the future.
Thank you, Greg. I know it was a hard question. So what message would you like to leave with our audience regarding coastal resilience and what they can do to support it? Because one of the key messages I want our listener to understand is that coastal resilience isn't just for scientists or engineers. It's something everyone can support, whether it's through advocacy, innovation, or simply staying informed. So what can you share with us regarding these specific topics?
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's all about our ability to adapt and to utilize limited resources. I was looking at a chart earlier. So this is data collected by NOAA about the number of disasters, so large natural disasters resulting from a changing climate. And they looked at the number of disasters that are a minimum of $1 billion of impact over the last 45 years. And if you look at just the last 10 years, and it started to increase. So these $1 billion plus disasters are starting to increase in their number and in their severity and in the cost, either to the national, state, or local government. So if you look at just in the last 10 years, you look at just the United States, and you look at only those $1 billion plus projects, the impact is $1.3 trillion. That is $1.3 trillion that didn't go to supporting humanitarian aid, or didn't go to supporting food security, or didn't go to supporting increased economic development for fishers, or any number of priorities, right? So coastal resilience is not just for the benefit of our coast and not just for those that are living along the coast. It's for all of us. We have to have a resilient coastline so that we can make investment decisions using limited resources well into the future. And as I said at the start, coastal resilience really is the first line of defense. It extends our runway because we have entered an era where we are in uncharted territory. If you look at the last 400,000, 800,000 years, we are entering that 1.5 degree plus scenario. And that's going to have significant impacts. As the atmosphere warms, it increases evaporation. And so more water is entering into the atmosphere. Bigger storms are occurring. Those storms are impacting the coastline and dumping a lot of water in inland environments. We've seen that in Brazil. We saw significant flooding in southern Brazil, impacting an entire town that will have a very difficult time to rebound after that. It was completely destroyed. We're seeing that more recently also in Barcelona. And then here in the United States, we've seen that in North Carolina with the hurricane that went inland and really left a tremendous amount of impact. So we just have to be very smart, build our coastal resilience with nature in order to protect ourselves, to protect our economies, and to protect the overall security of our nations. So this is a critically important topic. I'm happy to engage further with yourself, with any of your listeners, to see how Fugro can support that decision-making process using the geodata insights and modeling that we can provide.
Thank you, Greg, for sharing these figures. Actually, it makes things more concrete. And if I can add something, of course, coastal resilience is not only for coastal communities, but for everyone. And also the coasts for recovering is going to be much higher than the cost of implementing a coastal resilience strategies or mitigation strategies. So we also have to have this in mind. Just for listener, because it was really an interesting topic, if they want to reach out to you or having more information, what's the best way to be in contact with you? Is it through LinkedIn, through your website? What's the best way to be in touch with you?
Blue Economy Guy. Happy to engage with folks there, and then happy to have a further discussion. Thank you, Mary Lou.
Perfect. I will put all this information on the episode description. So that's a wrap for today's episode. Greg, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. It's been fascinating to learn about the role of geodata, nature-based solution, also the blue carbon, and the incredible work Fugro is doing to build more resilient coastlines. Your insights really highlight how important is it to act now and think creatively how we can protect our coastal communities and beyond. To our listener, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy this episode, don't forget to subscribe to BlueTech Around the World so you never miss out on future conversation. And if you find this discussion valuable, please share it with your network or leave a comment. I'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of blue tech and ocean innovation. Until then, stay curious.
BlueTech around the world.